The supply depot at Camp Pendleton hummed with the mechanical rhythm of peacetime routine, forklifts groaning under pallet loads, Marines shouting requisition codes across concrete bays that smelled of diesel and cardboard. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen moved through it all with the kind of stillness that looked like vacancy to anyone who'd never learned the difference. "Hey Chen, you gonna stand there all day or actually process my order?" Corporal Jackson leaned against her counter, jaw working a wad of gum, his smirk calibrated to draw an audience. Three younger Marines drifted closer, sensing entertainment. Maya's fingers didn't stop moving across the keyboard. "Your requisition's missing a signature from your CO. Battalion policy, no exceptions. Battalion policy." Jackson drew the words out like taffy. "You know what I think? I think you like hiding behind paperwork. Makes you feel important, playing gatekeeper with a clipboard." She met his eyes for exactly 1 second, no more, no less, then returned to the screen. Her pulse held steady at 62 beats per minute. The tremor in her left hand, the one that came when she was tired, stayed buried in her pocket. "Bring me the signature. I'll process it." "Jesus." Jackson pushed off the counter. "You even human under there? Or did they program you to just repeat regulations?" One of the younger Marines laughed, nervous. "Testing." Maya logged the requisition as incomplete and moved to the next file. Behind her sternum, something that used to be rage had calcified into a different substance entirely. Denser, colder, the kind of thing that could sit at the bottom of an ocean for decades without corroding. She didn't flinch, didn't fire back. 6 hours earlier, Captain Brennan had made his position clear. "Look, Chen, I'm not questioning your service record." He'd said it while studying his own reflection in the window, not her face. "But this isn't a charity operation. We need bodies who can perform under pressure, not someone who needs accommodations." The word hung in the air like a slur. "I don't require accommodations, sir. I require the same thing every Marine here requires, a chance to do the job." The job. Brennan finally turned, and his expression carried the particular condescension reserved for women who insisted on being taken seriously. "You had a panic attack during a routine inspection last month. Sergeant Miller's report said you were unresponsive for, what was it, 4 minutes? I was experiencing a TBI-related episode, sir. It's documented in my medical file. It doesn't affect your what? Your ability to function? Chen, you're in supply logistics because you can't handle a combat role anymore. Let's not pretend this is some temporary assignment." The office had been too warm. She'd felt sweat gathering at her collar, that specific prickle of humiliation that came from being reduced to your weakest moment, but she'd kept her spine straight, her voice level. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Denied. Dismissed." By 1400 hours, the story had metastasized. "I heard she just froze," someone said in the chow line, like completely dissociated. They had to shake her to snap her out of it. "What was she even doing before this?" "Admin, dude, she's barely 5'5". "You really think she saw combat?" Maya ate her sandwich methodically, chewing each bite 30 times the way the neurologist had recommended for managing her headaches. Across the mess hall, Sergeant Miller watched her with the satisfied expression of a man who'd successfully protected his unit from a liability. She'd learned not to correct the narrative, explaining that her panic attack had been a complex partial seizure, a rewiring of neural pathways after an IED blast that medical science still couldn't fully predict or control, only made people uncomfortable. Better to let them think she was weak. Weak was understandable. Weak fit their framework. What they couldn't know, the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve, a modification of a phoenix, but rendered in geometric precision that would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't operated in certain classified theaters. The coordinates embedded in the wing feathers, 34 Dg 15N, 62 Dg 12E, marked a compound outside Kandahar that officially never existed. The kind of place where women weren't supposed to have served. The kind of place that left its mark in more ways than one. The real trouble started when Jackson escalated. It was Friday afternoon, end of a long week, and Maya was running inventory in the back warehouse when she heard the voices approaching. Jackson, flanked by 2 others, carrying what passed for courage in groups. "Hey Chen, got a question for you." She didn't turn from the shelf she was counting. "Requisition forms are at the front desk." "Nah, not about supplies. More personal." He moved into her peripheral vision, close enough that she could smell the energy drink on his breath. "Me and the guys were wondering, you ever actually been anywhere? Like overseas? Or did you just ride a desk through your whole enlistment?" "My service record is available through proper channels." "That's not a no." He grinned, emboldened by her her lack of reaction. "See, thing is, Miller says you're basically LARPing, playing soldier. And honestly, looking at you, I believe it. No offense, but you don't exactly scream combat veteran." One of his companions laughed high and sharp. Maya set down her clipboard, turned, studied him with the same neutral assessment she'd once used to calculate blast radius patterns. "Are you finished, Corporal?" "What I'm finished with is watching you collect a paycheck for doing nothing. Some of us are actually trying to maintain standards around here. And you're Staff Sergeant Chen." The voice cut through the warehouse like a blade, crisp, precise, carrying the kind of authority that made Marines straighten their spines before their brains caught up. Maya turned to see a woman in dress blues approaching, her stride purposeful, the stars on her collar catching the fluorescent light. "Rear Admiral Victoria Hendress, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command." The warehouse had gone absolutely silent. Jackson's face cycled through confusion, recognition, then something approaching terror as he registered both the Admiral's rank and the fact that she'd addressed Chen by name. He stepped back, mouth opening wordlessly. Admiral Hendress stopped 3 feet from Maya, her gaze moving from Chen's carefully neutral expression to Jackson's group, then back again. "Gentlemen," the word was a scalpel, "I believe you have duties elsewhere." They scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Hendress waited until the warehouse door clanged shut, then let her attention settle fully on Maya. Her expression was unreadable, not warm, not cold, but something that suggested she was performing calculations of her own. "You've gotten quieter, Chen." "Ma'am." Maya's throat felt tight. She hadn't seen Hendress since the debrief in Virginia, 3 years and a lifetime ago. Hadn't expected to ever see her again. "Your sleeve, roll it up." It wasn't a request. Maya complied, the fabric bunching above her elbow to reveal the tattoo. Hendress leaned closer, studying the geometric pattern with the focus of someone reading encrypted text, which effectively she was. Phoenix variant. Hendress's voice had dropped to something quieter, almost reverent. "You were with the Kandahar Task Force, Operation Silent Talon." "Yes, ma'am." "The IED that ended your deployment, that was the safe house on Route Pluto, wasn't it? 4 KIA, 2 critical. You were one of the criticals." Maya's jaw tightened. "Yes, ma'am." Hendress straightened, her eyes now carrying something that looked like carefully controlled anger, but not directed at Maya. "Who's your commanding officer here?" "Captain Brennan, ma'am. Battalion S4. And he's aware of your background. He's aware I have a medical discharge notation in my file. TBI, PTSD markers. He's not aware of the operational details. Because they're classified." "Yes, ma'am." Hendress's mouth thinned into a line, "which means you can't defend yourself when idiots like Corporal Jackson question whether you've earned the right to wear the uniform." Maya said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like self-pity, and she'd sworn off that particular indulgence. "Where's Captain Brennan now?" "Office building, ma'am. 3rd floor. Take me there." Captain Brennan's office felt smaller with Hendress in it. He'd shot to his feet the moment she entered, his face cycling through shock and confusion before landing on the military default, rigid attention. "Admiral Hendress, this is unexpected. I wasn't informed." "You weren't informed because this isn't on your schedule, Captain." Hendress moved to the center of the room, her presence somehow filling every corner. "I'm here conducting an informal review of personnel assignments across Marine logistics units, making sure we're utilizing talent effectively." Brennan's relief was visible, an inspection he could handle. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course, ma'am. Happy to provide any information. Tell me about Staff Sergeant Chen." The relief evaporated. Brennan's eyes flicked to Maya, still standing at attention by the door, then back to Hendress. "Chen, she's competent. Handles supply logistics adequately, though she's had some challenges with stress management. Nothing that's affected the unit's readiness, but there have been incidents that raise concerns about incidents." Hendress let the word sit. "You're referring to her TBI-related seizure during inspection last month?" Yes, ma'am. That's in her file, but in a high-tempo environment, we need Marines who can—" "Tell me, Captain, what do you know about Operation Silent Talon?" Silence. Brennan's forehead creased. "Ma'am, I'm not familiar with—" "It was a classified joint Special Operations Task Force, operated in Afghanistan between 2012 and 2014, conducting high-value target capture and intelligence gathering in some of the most hostile territory in Helmand and Kandahar provinces." Hendress's voice had gone cold, clinical. "The unit had a 92% mission success rate, 0 compromised operations, 43 enemy combatants captured, 17 killed in action, and intelligence recovered that prevented an estimated 200 coalition casualties." Brennan's face had gone pale. Maya could see him trying to calculate where this was going, how badly he'd miscalculated. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Hendress continued, "was one of 12 personnel in that task force. She served as both a combat medic and a signals intelligence specialist. She conducted 17 successful reconnaissance reconnaissance missions in enemy-controlled urban terrain. She personally treated 9 wounded operators under fire, saving all 9 lives. And on her final operation, when an IED detonated inside a target compound, she maintained operational security even while sustaining a traumatic brain injury that required 3 surgical interventions and 18 months of rehabilitation. The office was so quiet Maya could hear the ventilation system humming. Her team was supposed to have 5 survivors that day, Hendris said. She's the reason there were 6. She dragged a wounded operator 70 meters through active enemy fire to reach the extraction point. The doctor said she had a skull fracture, internal bleeding, and early-stage shock. She coded twice in the medevac. Brennan's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Maya as if seeing her for the first time. Captain, Hendris said, do you understand what TSCI means? Top secret. Controlled information, ma'am. Correct. Which means Staff Sergeant Chen cannot discuss the details of her service to defend herself when people like you decide she's a liability. She can't explain that her panic attacks are actually complex neurological events resulting from an injury sustained in defense of this country. She can't tell you that the tattoo on her arm contains coordinates to a compound where she and her team prevented a major enemy offensive. She can only sit quietly and let you assume she's weak. Brennan's face had gone from pale to gray. Ma'am, I had no way of knowing. That's the problem, isn't it? You didn't know. You didn't ask. You saw a woman in a logistics role with a medical notation and decided she was a burden. You failed to recognize that combat trauma doesn't always look like how you imagine it should, and you failed in your duty as a leader to understand the capabilities and limitations of every Marine under your command. Admiral, I'm not finished. Hendris's voice could have etched glass. Your job, Captain, isn't to make assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't based on how they look or what challenges they face. Your job is to lead, to protect, to ensure that every Marine, especially those who've sacrificed for this institution, is treated with the dignity they've earned. You failed at that job. The silence stretched. Brennan looked like a man watching his career dissolve in real time. I'm recommending a formal review of your leadership practices, Hendris continued. Additionally, I'll be speaking with your battalion commander about implementing better protocols for handling combat veterans with TBI and PTSD. Staff Sergeant Chen isn't the only one being failed by this system, and that ends now. Yes, ma'am. Dismissed. Brennan hesitated for half a second, then left his own office, shoulders hunched like he'd taken physical blows. After the door closed, Hendris turned to Maya. Sit down, Chen. Maya obeyed, her body moving automatically even as her mind struggled to process what had just happened. Hendris took the chair Brennan had vacated, leaning back with a long exhale. You should have contacted me. Ma'am, Maya stopped, started again. I didn't think it would matter. The medical discharge was honorable. I completed the transition program. I thought I could just start over, be a regular Marine again. You were never a regular Marine, Chen. None of you were. Hendris's expression softened fractionally, and that's not a burden you should have to carry alone. The injury doesn't make you less capable. It makes you different, but different doesn't mean weak. Maya felt something crack behind her sternum. She kept her face neutral through sheer force of will. I've been doing fine, ma'am. Have you? Hendris tilted her head. Because from where I'm sitting, you've been absorbing abuse from people who don't have the clearance to know why they're wrong. You've been managing a neurological condition without adequate support, and you've been pretending that if you just keep your head down and work hard enough, eventually people will see you as something other than a liability. The crack widened. Maya's hands curled into fists on her thighs. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. I don't know how to do this. The words came out rougher than she'd intended. I don't know how to be the person who needs help. I spent 3 years learning how to be the person who gives help, how to run toward gunfire, how to make decisions under pressure, how to keep moving when everything in your body is screaming to stop. And now I'm supposed to just accept that I can't do that anymore, accept that I need accommodations and understanding and Chen. Hendris's voice was firm but not unkind. You're describing 2 different types of strength. What you did in Kandahar required one kind. What you're doing now, showing up every day, doing your job with precision despite the pain and the memory and the people who don't understand, that requires another kind. Neither is more valuable. Both are necessary. Maya's throat felt thick. She looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor that never fully disappeared. I just wanted to be useful again. You are useful, but you're also allowed to be human, allowed to need support while you figure out how to live with an injury that doesn't have a straightforward healing timeline. Hendris leaned forward. I'm going to to connect you with the program at UCSD. They're doing cutting-edge work with combat veterans who have TBI and PTSD. It's not a cure, no one's promising you that, but it's treatment that actually understands what you've been through. I've tried VA programs before, ma'am. The waiting lists, the bureaucracy. This is different. Navy-affiliated, fast-tracked for Special Operations personnel. I'll make sure you get priority placement. Hendris pulled a card from her pocket, set it on the desk between them. And I'm going to recommend you for something else if you're interested. Maya looked up. There are 14 other women from various classified programs who are facing similar challenges. Different operations, different time periods, but the same pattern. Women who served at the highest levels, sustained injuries, and then found themselves navigating a system that doesn't know how to support them. I'm working on creating a formal peer network, something more robust than the informal connections some of you have already built. A support group? More than that, a resource. A way to connect people who understand the specific challenges of reintegrating after serving in roles the military still doesn't fully acknowledge exist. We're calling it the Silent Emblem Project. Silent Emblem. Maya turned the words over in her mind, feeling their weight. You'd be one of the founding members, Hendris continued, not in any official capacity that would compromise your operational security, but as someone who can help shape what the program becomes. Help us figure out what veterans like you actually need, instead of what bureaucrats think you need. Ma'am, I'm not a leader. Not anymore. Chen, you led people through the worst circumstances imaginable. This is just a different kind of leadership, one that doesn't require you to pretend you're unbreakable. Maya sat with that. Outside the window, she could see Marines moving across the parade ground in formation, their movements synchronized and purposeful. She'd been one of them once, or at least she'd been something like them. Now she was something else, something in between. I'll think about it, she said finally. Good enough. Hendris stood. I'll be in touch about UCSD within the week. In the meantime, if anyone gives you trouble, anyone at all, you have my direct line. Yes, ma'am. Hendris paused at the door, glanced back. And Chen, that corporal earlier, Jackson, he's going to be very, very motivated to leave you alone from now on. Sergeant Miller, too. I made sure of it. Word spread the way it always did on military bases. Fast, mutating with each retelling, but carrying the essential truth at its core. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Staff Sergeant Chen wasn't just a supply clerk with a medical issue. She was something else, something classified. The specifics remained fuzzy. Operational security saw to that, but the general outline was clear enough. She'd done things, seen things, survived things that most of them couldn't imagine. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Younger Marines gave her more space. The jokes dried up. When she processed requisitions now, people said thank you instead of making smart-ass comments about paperwork. Corporal Jackson transferred to another unit within the week. Sergeant Miller found himself removed from supervisory duties pending a leadership review. Captain Brennan remained in his position, but Maya noticed he now greeted her by rank, made eye contact, asked if she needed anything to do her job more effectively. She didn't enjoy their discomfort, didn't feel vindicated. Mostly she felt tired. The UCSD program started in February. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo was a neurologist who'd spent 15 years studying traumatic brain injury in military populations. She was also, Maya learned in their first session, a former Army major who'd served in field hospitals in Iraq. The thing about TBI, Dr. Okonkwo said during their third meeting, is that healing isn't linear. You don't just get better in a straight line from point A to point B. Some days you'll feel like you're back at 70%. Other days you'll feel like you've regressed to 30. That's normal. That's how neuroplasticity works. Maya sat in the clinic's quiet consultation room, afternoon light slanting through half-closed lines. So, I'm never going to be back to how I was. No, Dr. Okonkwo said, and Maya appreciated the directness. You're not. But that doesn't mean you can't build something new, something functional. The brain is remarkably adaptive, Chen. It just needs time and the right support. The program was intensive. Cognitive behavioral therapy twice a week, medication management to control the seizures, physical therapy to address the chronic headaches. But it was also, for the first time since her injury, treatment that didn't feel like she was being processed through a bureaucratic machine. The group sessions were smaller. The other veterans in her cohort understood things without her having to explain. When she described the frustration of losing words mid-sentence, of feeling her thoughts scatter like dropped beads, someone else would nod and say, yeah, exactly like that. It didn't fix anything, but it made the unfixed parts feel less isolating. The Silent Emblem Project launched in April. Admiral Hendris had secured funding through a combination of Navy Special Warfare discretionary funds and private grants from veterans organizations. The program operated quietly. No press releases, no public announcements, but word spread through the encrypted networks that connected women who'd served in roles roles most people didn't know existed. Maya found herself on phone calls with former Air Force combat controllers, Army intelligence operatives, Coast Guard tactical teams, women who'd learned to be invisible, to let others assume they were support staff while they did work that required precision and nerve and the kind of mental toughness that left marks you couldn't see. They talked about the practical challenges, navigating VA systems that weren't designed for them, dealing with employers who didn't understand why a supply clerk might need accommodations, explaining to family members why they couldn't talk about the bulk of their service. But they also talked about the victories, the small adaptations that made life workable, the moments when someone finally got it without needing the whole explanation, the gradual, frustrating, non-linear process of building a life that looked different from what they'd imagined but still felt meaningful. Maya didn't consider herself a leader, but she found herself coordinating logistics for the group because logistics was what she understood, what she could do even when her brain felt like static. She created spreadsheets tracking resources, connected people with clinicians who actually understood military-related TBI, helped others navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of getting their service-connected disabilities properly rated. It was unglamorous work, but it mattered. 6 months after Admiral Hendriss's visit, Maya stood in the supply depot at 0600, running morning inventory before the rush started. Her hands didn't shake anymore, or rather they still shook, but she'd learned to work around it. The headaches came less frequently. The seizures were controlled. She still had bad days, days when her brain felt like a computer running with corrupted code, but they were fewer and farther between. The depot door opened. A young corporal entered, nervous, holding a requisition form. "Staff Sergeant Chen, I'm new to the unit. My CO said you're the person to see about equipment requisitions, special orders, or general supply questions." "Equipment, I need forms incomplete." Maya pointed to the signature line. "Need your CO's authorization and the 8-digit supply code, NSN, not the old federal code. You'll find it in section 3 of the supply manual." The corporal's face fell. Sorry, I'm still learning the system. I didn't mean." "Not a problem." Maya pulled out a reference guide, marked the relevant page. "This'll help. Most common mistake with new requisitions. Come back when you have the signatures and codes. I'll process it within 24 hours. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant." The corporal left. Maya returned to her inventory, methodically checking quantities against records. It was quiet work, precise. Some people thought it was boring, but Maya had learned to find satisfaction in the exactness of it, in systems that worked when you followed the rules, in problems that had clear solutions. She wasn't saving lives, wasn't conducting reconnaissance or treating wounded operators under fire, but she was doing her job with the same precision she'd once brought to combat, and that, she'd learned, was its own kind of service. The phoenix on her arm, hidden beneath her sleeve, carried coordinates that most people would never understand. That was fine. The people who needed to know already did. The rest could make whatever assumptions they wanted. She had work to do. Continue. By October, the Silent Emblem Project had grown to 23 members. Maya sat in her small base apartment, laptop open on the kitchen table, scrolling through the encrypted messaging platform they used. A former Marine raider from North Carolina was asking about neurologists who understood blast-related TBI. An Air Force pararescue specialist needed help navigating a disability claim that the VA kept denying because her injuries weren't consistent with her listed MOS. Maya typed responses, attached resources, made connections. It was 2100 hours, well past the end of her duty day, but this had become part of her routine. An hour or two each night, helping people who were fighting the same invisible battles she'd fought. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Okonkwo. "New cohort starting in January. Looking for peer mentors. Interested." Maya stared at the message. 6 months ago, the idea of mentoring anyone would have felt absurd. She'd barely been keeping herself afloat, but now... "Yes," she typed. "Send me the details." Another buzz, this time from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, then saw the message preview. "SSG Chen, this is Captain Rebecca Torres, recently transitioned out of MARSOC. Admiral Hendriss gave me your contact. Could we talk?" Maya saved the number, sent a quick reply. "Of course. Call anytime after 1800 tomorrow." She closed the laptop, leaned back in her chair. Through the thin walls of base housing, she could hear a couple arguing in the next apartment, a television playing too loud downstairs. Normal sounds, peacetime sounds. The tattoo on her arm itched sometimes, especially when it was cold. Phantom sensation, Dr. Okonkwo had explained. Neural pathways misfiring, sending signals about damage that had technically healed. The brain's way of remembering what the body wanted to forget. Maya traced the geometric lines through her sleeve, feeling their shape without seeing them. 34 degree 15N, 62 degree 12E. She could could still picture the compound, the crumbling walls, the narrow corridors, the dust that got into everything. Could still hear the radio chatter in the moments before the blast, still feel the concussive force that had rewritten her neurology. Some nights she dreamed about it, woke up with her heart racing, convinced she could smell burning plastic and copper. But those nights were getting rarer. The therapy helped, the medication helped, having people who understood helped most of all. The formal investigation into leadership practices at her battalion concluded in November. Captain Brennan received a letter of reprimand in his permanent file and was required to complete additional training on supporting service members with combat-related injuries. Sergeant Miller was reassigned to a different unit with no supervisory responsibilities. 3 other NCOs received counseling for contributing to what the investigating officer termed a culture of dismissiveness toward personnel with documented service-connected disabilities. Maya read the summary report in Admiral Hendriss's forwarded email, felt nothing in particular. Brennan's career would survive. Miller would complain about political correctness and move on. The younger Marines who'd participated in the mockery would learn to be more careful about who they targeted. It wasn't justice, but it was accountability, which was more than most people in her position ever got. The report included a paragraph about recommended systemic changes, better training for commanders on recognizing and accommodating TBI and PTSD, improved protocols for personnel transitioning from classified roles to conventional units, mandatory briefings on the diversity of combat experiences and how trauma manifests, bureaucratic language. But if it meant one less veteran had to sit quietly while people assumed weakness, maybe it was worth the administrative weight. December brought an unexpected visitor. Maya was in the warehouse, conducting a monthly audit, when she heard boots on concrete behind her. She turned to find a woman in marine dress blues, gunnery sergeant chevrons on her sleeves, eyes that carried the particular weariness of someone who'd seen too much and compartmentalized it all. Staff Sergeant Chen. Yes, Gunny. Gunnery Sergeant Lisa Reeves. I'm with Wounded Warrior Battalion West at Camp Pendleton. Admiral Hendriss suggested I talk to you about a position we're trying to fill. Maya set down her clipboard. What kind of position? We need someone to help coordinate transition services for Marines coming out of combat roles with TBI, PTSD, and other invisible injuries. Someone who understands the clinical side, but also understands what it's actually like to navigate the system while your brain isn't working the way it used to. Reeves's expression was direct, assessing. Someone who knows the difference between what the manuals say should work and what actually helps. I'm not a trained counselor, Gunny. I'm logistics. Logistics is exactly what we need. These Marines aren't struggling because they don't have access to therapy. They're struggling because no one's helping them coordinate 20 different appointments, understand their benefits, figure out which programs are worth the time and which are just bureaucratic box checking. Reeves crossed her arms. They need someone who can translate military medicine into something functional, someone who's been through it. Maya felt her pulse tick up, not anxiety, but something closer to recognition. What would the job actually involve? Case management, helping Marines develop individualized transition plans, connecting them with resources, advocating when the system is failing them. It's grunt work mostly, paperwork and phone calls and fighting with a VA. But it's work that actually changes outcomes. I'd need to maintain my current MOS, Maya said. I'm not ready to completely leave supply. Understood. We're thinking 20 hours a week to start. You'd keep your current position at reduced hours. If it works out and you want to increase, we can revisit. Maya looked around the warehouse, the neat rows of supplies, the systematic organization she'd spent months perfecting. It was good work, necessary work, but it was also static, contained. Can I think about it? Take 2 weeks. Reeves handed her a card. But Chen, I read your file. What you did in Kandahar, what you've built with the Silent Emblem Project, what you're doing at UCSD as a peer mentor. That's not someone who's content just processing paperwork. That's someone who knows how to lead, even when the leadership looks different than it used to. Maya called Admiral Hendriss that night. You talked to Gunny Reeves, Hendriss said without preamble. You set that up. I made an introduction. She made the offer. There's a difference. Maya sat on her apartment's small balcony, phone pressed to her ear, watching the lights of the base spread out below. Ma'am, I don't know if I'm qualified for— Chen, stop. I'm going to say this once, and I need you to actually hear it. You are not the same person you were in Kandahar. That person doesn't exist anymore, but that doesn't mean the person you are now is somehow less valuable or capable. It means you have different strengths, different ways of serving. Maya's throat tightened. I keep waiting to feel like myself again. Maybe that's the wrong goal. Hendriss's voice softened fractionally. Maybe the goal is to figure out who you are now, to build a life that works for this version of you, instead of mourning the version that can't exist anymore. That sounds like something a therapist would say. I've been in therapy for 6 years. You pick things up. A pause. The position with Wounded Warrior Battalion, you'd be good at it. it. Better than good, but only if you take it because you actually want it, not because you think you owe it to anyone. I don't know what I want, then figure it out. You have 2 weeks. Maya spent those 2 weeks paying attention to how she felt during different parts of her day, processing requisitions, satisfying, predictable, safe, working with the Silent Emblem Project, frustrating but meaningful. The problems were messy, the solutions incomplete, but the connections felt real. Her sessions at UCSD, uncomfortable but necessary. Growth hurt. That didn't make it wrong. Talking with Captain Torres, the MARSOC veteran who'd reached out, exhausting but important. Torres was 3 months out from her last deployment, struggling to adjust to civilian life, drowning in paperwork she didn't understand. Maya had spent an hour on the phone walking her through VA claim forms, and at the end, Torres had said, "Thank you. I've been trying to figure this out for weeks." No one else explained it in a way that actually made sense. That had felt like something. On day 13, Maya made her decision. She called Gunny Reeves. "I'll take the position. 20 hours a week to start, but I need to set some boundaries." "Go ahead. I'm still managing a TBI. Some days are going to be harder than others. I need flexibility to adjust my schedule when I'm having a bad day, and I need people to trust that I'm not faking or exaggerating when I say I need that accommodation." "Done. And I want input on how the program develops. I'm not interested in being a figurehead or a token. If I'm going to do this, I need to actually be able to shape what it becomes. That's exactly why we want you." "Okay," Maya exhaled. "Okay, when do I start?" "January 2nd. Come by my office the week after Christmas. We'll get the paperwork sorted." Christmas Eve, Maya drove to the UCSD Medical Center for a final appointment of the year. Dr. Okonkwo reviewed her latest cognitive assessments, nodding as she scrolled through the results. "Your processing speed is up. Working memory is stabilizing. The medication adjustments seem to be managing the seizure activity well. I still have bad days." "You're always going to have bad days, Chen. That's not a failure of treatment. That's the reality of living with a permanent neurological injury. The goal isn't perfection. It's functionality and quality of life." Maya sat with that. She'd spent so long chasing the idea of being fixed that she'd never stopped to consider whether functional might be enough. "I took a new position," she said, "working with Wounded Warrior Battalion, helping other veterans with transition services." Dr. Okonkwo smiled, a rare expression on her usually neutral face. "That's good. Really good. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified. Excited. Both. That's usually how you know you're doing something worth doing." New Year's Eve, Maya attended a small gathering that one of the Silent Emblem members had organized. A virtual meeting, since they were scattered across the country. 23 faces filled her screen. Former Special Operations personnel, intelligence specialists, combat medics, women who'd served in roles that officially didn't exist, who'd sustained injuries that didn't fit neat categories, who'd learned to navigate a system that barely acknowledged their existence. They weren't celebrating anything in particular, just marking time, acknowledging that they'd survived another year. Someone asked what everyone's goals were for the new year. The answers varied. Finish physical therapy, get a degree, find a job that didn't trigger constant anxiety, convince the VA to actually read their medical files. When it was Maya's turn, she said, "Figure out how to be useful again, in a different way than before." One of the other women, a former Army interrogator named Sarah, laughed. "Chen, you've been useful this entire time. You just didn't realize it." "What do you mean?" "This network, the resources you've compiled, the fact that you answer messages at midnight when someone's having a crisis. You think that's not valuable?" Sarah shook her head. "Some people save lives by running into gunfire. Other people save lives by making sure those people don't fall through the cracks afterward. Both matter." Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not a crack this time, more like a settling, like pieces finding their proper arrangement. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Okay." January 2nd, Maya reported to Wounded Warrior Battalion West. Gunny Reeves's office was cluttered with filing cabinets, whiteboards covered in case notes, and motivational posters that had clearly been issued by someone in headquarters who'd never actually worked with wounded Marines. One of them said, "Pain is temporary, pride is forever." Someone had added a sticky note underneath, "Unless you have chronic pain, then it's pretty fucking permanent." Maya liked the place immediately. "Your first case," Reeves said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Lance Corporal David Martinez, 22 years old, lost his left leg below the knee in a vehicle rollover outside Fallujah. Physically, he's recovering well. Prosthetic fitting is going smoothly, but he's struggling with the transition. Depressed, isolated, not engaging with the support programs we've offered." Maya opened the folder, scanned the medical summary. "He's been flagged for potential PTSD. Possible, but he's refusing to talk to the mental health team. Says he's fine, just needs to figure out his next steps." Reeves leaned back in her chair. "I need you to meet with him. Figure out what he actually needs versus what we think he needs. What if he won't talk to me either? Then you'll figure out a different approach. That's why you're here, Chen. You know how to work the problem. Lance Corporal Martinez looked younger than 22. He sat in the consultation room with his arms crossed, jaw tight, radiating the kind of defensive hostility that Maya recognized from her own worst days. When she introduced herself, he barely made eye contact. "Another case manager," he said flatly. "Great." Maya sat down across from him, set his folder aside. "I'm not here to manage your case. I'm here to help you figure out what you actually need. I need everyone to stop treating me like I'm broken." "Okay." He blinked, thrown by her lack of argument. "Okay, you're not broken. You're injured. There's a difference." Maya leaned forward slightly. "You're also stuck in a system that's designed to process people efficiently, not to actually listen to what they need. So tell me, what do you need?" Martinez's defenses wavered. I don't know, a plan. Everyone keeps telling me to take it one day at a time, focus on healing, but I can't just exist without knowing what I'm working toward." "What do you want to work toward?" "I want to stay in. I know that's probably not realistic, but I'm not ready to give up on the core. This is the only thing I've ever been good at." Maya understood that feeling in her bones. "Have you talked to anyone about continuation on active duty? There are options for Marines with amputations, depending on the role. My command said it was unlikely that I should focus on med boarding out." "Did they explain the specific requirements, or did they just assume you wouldn't qualify?" Martinez's expression shifted, anger mixing with something that looked like hope. I don't think they explained anything specific." "Then let's find out what the actual requirements are. Let's figure out if continuation is possible, and if it's not, let's build a transition plan that's actually based on what you want your life to look like, not what's administratively convenient." For the first time since she'd entered the room, Martinez met her eyes fully. "You really think that's possible?" "I think it's worth trying, and I think you deserve someone in your corner who's going to fight for what you actually need, not just what's easiest." The work was harder than Maya had anticipated. Fighting with a VA required the patience of a saint and the stubbornness of a mule. Half the battle was just getting people on the phone who could actually make decisions. The other half was translating military medical documentation into civilian language that benefits specialists could understand. She worked Martinez's case for 3 weeks before getting a clear answer on continuation requirements. It turned out he did qualify. With the right prosthetic specifications and physical therapy benchmarks, he could return to a non-combat MOS. No one had bothered to actually check. When she told him, he cried, right there in her office, completely unself-conscious. "Thank you," he kept saying. "Thank you." Maya had handed him tissues and felt a fierce protective anger at a system that made wounded Marines thank people for doing the bare minimum of checking regulations. By March, Maya was handling 12 cases. Each one was different. Each one required creative problem-solving, bureaucratic navigation, and the ability to sit with people's pain without trying to fix it immediately. She was good at it, better than she'd expected. But it was also exhausting in ways that combat never had been. Combat had clear objectives, defined enemies, moments of victory. This was all gray areas and incomplete solutions and victories that looked like getting someone's disability rating corrected from 30% to 70% after 6 months of appeals. She had a bad day in late March. Woke up with a migraine that made light feel like knives. Her thoughts scattered and slow. She called Gunny Reeves, said she needed to work from home. Reeves said, "Do what you need to do. Your cases can wait a day. No guilt, no accusation, just accommodation." Maya spent the day in her darkened apartment, ice pack on her forehead, answering emails in short bursts when her brain allowed. By evening, the migraine had receded to a dull throb. She felt wrung out but functional. This was her life now. Not perfect, not what she'd imagined, but workable. Admiral Hendress visited Camp Pendleton again in April. She invited Maya to dinner off base, a quiet Mexican restaurant where they could talk without being overheard. Over tacos and water, Maya had stopped drinking alcohol. It triggered her headaches. Hendress asked about the wounded warrior position. "It's good work," Maya said. "Hard, but good. You've helped 23 Marines in 4 months. That's not insignificant. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does." Hendress smiled slightly. "That's how you know you're doing it right. The minute you think you've done enough is the minute you should probably stop." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Hendress said, "I'm retiring next year." Maya looked up, surprised. "Ma'am, 32 years. It's time. But before I go, I want to make sure the Silent Emblem project has proper institutional support. Not just my personal attention, but actual funding and infrastructure." She met Maya's eyes. "I want you to take it over." "Ma'am, I'm not—" "Don't say you're not qualified. You helped build it. You understand what it needs. And more importantly, you understand what the members need, because you're one of them. I'm already working 20 hours a week with Wounded Warrior. I don't know if I can. Then we find funding to bring you on full-time. Make this your primary job. The logistics work was always temporary, Chen. You knew that. Maya set down her taco, appetite suddenly gone. I don't know if I'm ready to give up that kind of stability. I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm asking you to consider it, to think about what kind of impact you want to have and what kind of life you want to build. Hendriss's voice softened. You've spent the last year proving to yourself that you're still capable. Now it's time to figure out what you're capable of. Maya thought about it for weeks. She made lists, pros and cons, practical considerations, emotional factors. The lists didn't help. Every time she thought she'd reached a conclusion, she'd wake up the next day feeling differently. Dr. Okonkwo suggested a different approach. Stop trying to make the perfect decision. Make the decision that feels aligned with who you are now and what you value. Then commit to making it work. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you'll make a different choice later. Nothing is permanent, Chen. Not even the consequences of TBI. In May, Maya took Martinez to a continuation board. He'd completed his physical therapy benchmarks, passed the required fitness tests, and had a clear path to transitioning into a support MOS. The board lasted 45 minutes. Martinez answered questions about his capabilities, his goals, his understanding of his limitations. Maya sat in the back row, hands clenched in her lap, watching officers decide someone else's future. When the board president announced their decision, continuation approved, Martinez turned around and found her in the crowd. His smile was incandescent. Afterward, in the parking lot, he said, I couldn't have done this without you. You did the work, Martinez. I just helped you navigate the bureaucracy. Yeah, but he struggled for words. You didn't treat me like I was damaged. You treated me like I was a Marine who needed specific support. That matters. That made me believe I could actually do this. Maya felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that she hadn't experienced in years. You're going to be fine, she said. Better than fine. What about you, Staff Sergeant? What's next for you? Maya looked across the parking lot toward the base beyond. I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out. On June 1st, Maya submitted her formal letter. She was accepting the position as director of the Silent Emblem Project, effective September 1st. She'd transition out of supply logistics entirely, reduce her hours with Wounded Warrior Battalion to part-time consultation, and take on the full-time work of building a sustainable support network for women veterans from classified programs. It felt terrifying. It felt right. Gunny Reeves read the letter, nodded. You're going to be good at this. You don't know that. I've watched you for 6 months, Chen. You're already good at it. Now you're just going to do it with actual resources and institutional backing. Reeves extended her hand. Go change some lives. September arrived with the particular heat of Southern California summer, refusing to yield to autumn. Maya's new office was small, just enough space for a desk, filing cabinets, and a single window that looked out over the Pacific. The walls were bare. She'd put up pictures eventually, once she figured out what belonged there. Her first official act as director was to schedule a virtual meeting with all current Silent Emblem members, 32 women now, spread across 18 states. Some she'd worked with extensively, others she'd never spoken to directly. When they were all connected, she said, I'm not going to give a speech about how important this work is. You already know. You're living it. What I want to do is hear from you. What's working? What's not? What do you need that you're not getting? The answers came slowly at first, then faster. Better coordination with VA programs, more connections to employers who actually understood military service, resources for family members who were trying to support veterans they didn't fully understand, legal assistance for disability claims, mental health providers who specialized in combat trauma. Maya took notes, made lists, started building a framework. It was the same skill set she'd used in Kandahar, assessing needs, coordinating resources, solving logistical problems under pressure, just applied differently, just serving a different kind of mission. By December, the Silent Emblem Project had 53 members. They'd established partnerships with 3 universities conducting TBI research, connected with a law firm that was providing pro bono disability claim support, and created a mentorship program pairing women who were further along in their recovery with those who were just starting to navigate the system. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. It was progress. Maya still had bad days. Days when her brain felt like static, when words disappeared mid-sentence, when the headaches made coherent thought impossible. But she'd learned to work around them, to ask for help, to accept that accommodating her disability wasn't weakness. It was pragmatism. On Christmas Eve, she sat in her apartment, slightly larger now, with actual furniture, reviewing the year's accomplishments. It had been 20 months since Admiral Hendriss had walked into that warehouse. 20 months of stumbling forward, figuring things out, building something new from the wreckage of who she used to be. Her phone buzzed. A message from Captain Torres, the MARSOC veteran she'd helped almost almost a year ago. Just got my disability rating approved, 90%. Thank you for helping me understand the process. I'm finally getting the support I need. Maya smiled, typed back, "That's all you. I just pointed you in the right direction." Another message, this one from Martinez. "Finished my first month in my new MOS. It's different but good. Hope you're doing well, Staff Sergeant." Then one from Sarah, the former Army interrogator. "New member just reached out. Air Force, explosive ordnance disposal, severe PTSD. Can you connect with her?" Maya looked at her laptop, at the spreadsheets and contact lists and resources she'd compiled, at the network she'd helped build, at the small, incremental ways she was helping people navigate systems that weren't designed for them. She thought about Kandahar, about the compound that officially didn't exist, about operations that remained classified, about the person she'd been before the blast rewired her brain. That person was gone, but maybe that was okay. Maybe this person, the one who fought bureaucracy instead of enemy combatants, who coordinated support networks instead of tactical operations, who helped people survive the aftermath instead of the event itself. Maybe this person was exactly who she was supposed to become. The phoenix on her arm carried coordinates to a place that had destroyed and rebuilt her. 34-15N, 62-12E. She'd never go back there, but she carried it with her anyway. A reminder that transformation was possible, that you could break apart and reassemble into something different but still valuable. She opened her laptop, pulled up the message from the Air Force veteran, and started typing. There was work to do, and for the first time in years, Maya Chen felt ready to do it. To continue. The Air Force veteran's name was Captain Alicia Vasquez. Her service record, what Maya could see of it, was sparse. EOD technician, multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Medical separation in 2024 with notations for PTSD, chronic pain, and what the paperwork euphemistically called service-connected neurological symptoms. They scheduled a call for the first week of January. When Vasquez's face appeared on Maya's screen, she looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. It was the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting invisible battles for too long. "Captain Vasquez, thanks for reaching out. Just Alicia, please." I don't use the rank anymore." Her voice was flat, carefully controlled. "Sarah said you might be able to help, but honestly, I'm not sure anyone can." Maya had heard that tone before. "Tell me what's going on. Where do I even start?" Alicia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The VA rated me at 30%. 30. For PTSD that makes me afraid to leave my house some days. For nerve damage that means I can't feel half my left hand. For migraines that leave me non-functional for days at a time. They said my conditions weren't severe enough to warrant a higher rating." "Did they have access to your full medical records?" "I don't know. Maybe. The whole process was, I couldn't follow it. Couldn't keep track of what documents went where, what appointments I was supposed to attend. I missed 2 hearings because I didn't understand the notification system. And now they're telling me I have to wait another year to appeal." Maya pulled up her notes. "Okay, first thing, you can request a reconsideration based on new evidence, which doesn't require waiting for the standard appeal period. Second, we need to get your complete military medical records and make sure the VA actually has them. A lot of times, especially with classified assignments, records get fragmented across different systems. How do you know all this?" "Because I went through the same thing. Different injuries, same bureaucratic nightmare." Maya met her eyes through the screen. "The system isn't designed to help people like us, Alicia. It's designed for simple, straightforward cases. When you're dealing with injuries from operations that are partially classified or symptoms that don't fit neat diagnostic categories, you have to fight for everything." Alicia's composure cracked slightly. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know. That's why we're going to fight together. You're not doing this alone anymore." By February, Maya had helped Alicia compile a complete medical history, connect with a veterans law organization that specialized in EOD-related injuries, and file for reconsideration with properly documented evidence. But Alicia's case had also revealed something larger, a pattern. Maya started digging through the silent emblem network, asking specific questions about disability ratings and VA experiences. What she found made her angry in a way she hadn't felt since her own worst days. Of the 53 women in the network, 41 had been underrated by the VA on their initial claims. The average rating was 28%, despite documented injuries that should have warranted 70% or higher. Many had been told their conditions weren't service-connected because their listed MOS didn't match the injuries they'd sustained, because their actual jobs had been classified, because the system had no mechanism for handling warriors whose service couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Maya compiled the data, created a presentation, and sent it to Admiral Hendricks with a subject line that read, "We have a systemic problem." Admiral Hendricks called her the next day. "This is worse than I thought." "It gets worse," Maya said. "I've been talking to advocates at other organizations. This isn't just happening to women from classified programs. It's happening to anyone whose injuries don't fit the VA's standard evaluation criteria. But women from SOF and intelligence backgrounds are getting hit hardest because we have the added barrier of not being able to fully document our service. What do you need?" "Access. I need to present this to someone at the VA who has actual decision-making authority, not a regional office, not a benefits coordinator, someone who can implement policy changes. I'll make some calls. But Chen, this is going to be a long fight. Years, probably. The VA moves at glacial speed, even when they want to change. Then we start now." In March, Maya testified before a VA advisory committee. She'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but she stood in front of a panel of administrators and advocates, laptop open with her presentation queued, and spoke with the same precision she'd once used to deliver mission briefings. "The current disability rating system fails veterans whose service was conducted in classified capacities for three primary reasons. First, incomplete medical documentation due to operational security restrictions. Second, MOS listings that don't reflect actual job duties. Third, evaluators who lack the context to understand how certain injuries were sustained." She clicked to the next slide, a graph showing the rating discrepancy between silent emblem members and comparable male veterans from acknowledged special operations units. Women from classified programs are receiving disability ratings an average of 42 percentage points lower than their male counterparts, despite comparable or more severe injuries. This isn't because their conditions are less serious. It's because the system doesn't know how to evaluate them. One of the committee members, a former Army colonel, raised his hand. "Ms. Chen, are you suggesting the VA is deliberately discriminating against these veterans?" "I'm suggesting the system is structured in a way that produces discriminatory outcomes, regardless of intent. When your evaluation framework assumes that combat-related injuries only occur in certain roles, and those roles are predominantly held by men, you create a system that systematically undervalues women's service. What's your proposed solution?" Maya had been waiting for this question. "Three things. First, establish a specialized review process for veterans from classified programs with evaluators who have appropriate clearances and can access sealed medical records. Second, implement training for all VA benefits specialists on recognizing combat trauma in non-traditional contexts. Third, create a presumptive service connection for certain injuries, like TBI, PTSD, and hearing loss, for any veteran who deployed to a combat zone, regardless of their listed MOS." The committee members exchanged glances. Maya could see the calculations happening. Cost, logistics, political feasibility. These are ambitious recommendations. These are necessary recommendations. Right now, you have veterans who risk their lives for this country being told their injuries aren't severe enough or aren't service-connected because the paperwork doesn't match the reality. That's a failure of our obligation to them. The committee didn't make any immediate commitments, but 2 months later, the VA announced a pilot program, a specialized review board for veterans from certain classified units, with properly cleared evaluators and expanded access to sealed records. It wasn't everything Maya had asked for, but it was movement. Alicia Vasquez was accepted into the pilot program. Her rating was reevaluated from 30% to 80%, with retroactive benefits. When she called Maya to share the news, she was crying. "I can afford proper treatment now. I can actually see the specialists who might be able to help with the nerve damage. Her voice broke. "Thank you. God, thank you. You did this," Maya said. "You fought for yourself. I just helped you navigate the system. You did more than that. You believed me when I said I was hurt, even though the paperwork didn't reflect it. That matters more than you know." By summer, the Silent Emblem Project had evolved beyond just peer support. They'd established a formal advocacy branch, helping veterans navigate disability claims and appeals. They'd partnered with 3 law firms providing pro bono representation. They'd created a database of medical providers who understood military-related TBI and PTSD, and they were working with Admiral Hendricks' successor at Naval Special Warfare Command to develop better transition protocols for women leaving classified roles. Maya's days were long. She was working 50 hours a week, sometimes 60, coordinating cases and managing partnerships and fighting bureaucratic battles that seemed designed to exhaust people into giving up. But she was also, for the first time since her injury, genuinely proud of what she was doing. Dr. Okonkwo noticed the change during their quarterly check-in. "You look different." "Different how?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying as much weight." Maya considered this. "I think I figured out what I'm supposed to be doing. It took a while, but yeah, I think this is it. How's your cognitive function? Any changes in seizure frequency or severity? Seizures are stable. One breakthrough episode in March, but that was during a high-stress week and I wasn't sleeping enough. Cognitive function is good, better than it's been. I still have bad days, but they're manageable. And you're not pushing through them anymore? You're actually taking accommodations when you need them? Mostly. It's still hard to admit when I need to step back, but I'm getting better at it. Dr. Okonkwo made a note. That's real progress, Chen. The medical stuff is important, but learning to work with your limitations instead of fighting them, that's what makes the difference between surviving and actually living. In August, Maya received an unexpected email. The subject line read, silent emblem, Navy Cross recipient requesting contact. She opened it, read through twice to make sure she was understanding correctly. Commander Jessica Harrington, Navy Cross. Multiple deployments as a helicopter pilot. Medical separation after a crash in Afghanistan that left her with a spinal injury and chronic pain. Currently fighting a VA claim that had been denied 3 times. I heard about your work through channels, the email said. I didn't think anyone would be able to help, but if there's even a chance, I'd like to talk. Maya stared at the screen. A Navy Cross recipient shouldn't have to fight this hard for recognition, but here they were. She typed a response. Call me anytime. We'll figure this out together. Commander Harrington's case took 8 months to resolve. It required coordinating with Navy Personnel Command to obtain properly documented flight records, connecting with medical experts who could testify about the long-term effects of spinal cord injuries, and 3 separate appeals to different VA regional offices. But in April of the following year, Harrington's rating was adjusted to 100%, with full benefits and retroactive pay. When Maya told her, Harrington went quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what the worst part was? Not the pain, not the disability. It was feeling like my service didn't matter. Like because I couldn't prove how bad it was through the right paperwork, it wasn't real. It was real. It is real. The system just failed to recognize it. Why do you do this work, Chen? I've been researching you. I know your background. You could be doing anything. Why spend your life fighting the VA for people you've never met? Maya thought about Kandahar, about the warehouse where she'd been mocked, about Admiral Hendris seeing the tattoo and understanding what it meant, about every veteran she'd helped who'd said the same thing. Thank you for believing me. Because someone did it for me, she said finally. And because I know what it's like to be invisible, to have your value questioned because people can't see past their assumptions. If I can prevent even one person from going through that alone, it's worth it. By the time Admiral Hendris's retirement ceremony arrived in June, the Silent Emblem Project had 127 members across 34 states. Maya attended the ceremony at Naval Base San Diego, watching from the audience as Hendris was honored for her 3 decades of service. The speeches highlighted her operational leadership, her role in expanding opportunities for women in special warfare, her advocacy for wounded warriors. They didn't mention the classified programs, couldn't mention them, but Maya understood the subtext in every carefully worded phrase about expanding access and ensuring all capable personnel have opportunities to serve. After the ceremony, Hendris found Maya in the crowd. Walk with me? They strolled along the waterfront, away from the reception crowd, watching sailboats drift across the bay. I'm leaving it in good hands, Hendris said. The command? The Silent Emblem Project. You. All of it. She smiled. When I first met you, you were so determined to pretend everything was fine, to not need help. Now look at you, building an entire organization around the idea that needing help is okay. You made that possible. If you hadn't walked into that warehouse, you would have figured it out eventually. Maybe differently, maybe slower, but you would have figured it out. You're a survivor, Chen. That's what survivors do. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Maya said, what are you going to do now? In retirement? Travel. Read. Maybe write a memoir. Heavily redacted, of course. Spend time with my family. Hendris paused. And stay connected with the project if you'll have me. Just in an advisory capacity. I'm not trying to hover. We'd be lucky to have you. Good, because I'm not actually very good at stepping away from things I care about. Hendris stopped, turned to face her. You've built something important, Maya. Don't underestimate the impact you're having. Every veteran you help, every system you change, every person who feels seen and validated, that ripples out, that changes lives. Maya felt her throat tighten. I just wish we didn't have to fight so hard for things that should be basic. Recognition, support, healthcare. It shouldn't be this difficult. No, it shouldn't, but it is. So we keep fighting. Hendris extended her hand. It's been an honor serving with you, Staff Sergeant Chen. Maya shook her hand, felt the weight of everything those words carried. The honor was mine, Admiral. That fall, Maya received an invitation she hadn't expected. The Women in Military Service Memorial was hosting an event honoring veterans veterans from classified programs, the first public acknowledgement of their service that many would ever receive. Maya had been asked to speak. She almost declined. Public speaking still made her anxious, and the idea of standing in front of hundreds of people, talking about her service, felt like exposing something that should stay hidden. But then she thought about all the women in the Silent Emblem Network, about Alicia Vasquez and Commander Harrington and Captain Torres, about the 23 members who still hadn't received adequate disability ratings, about the ones who were still fighting to be seen. She accepted. The memorial stood in Arlington, Virginia, overlooking the Potomac River. Maya had arrived 2 days early, using the time to prepare her remarks and meet with some of the other speakers, women who'd served in roles from signals intelligence to special reconnaissance, whose contributions had been classified for decades. On the day of the event, she stood backstage in dress blues she rarely wore anymore, feeling the weight of her service ribbons and the empty space where combat decorations should have been but couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from nerves, from the tremor that never fully went away. She pressed them together, took slow breaths, reminded herself that she'd briefed admirals and generals. She could do this. When they called her name, she walked to the podium and looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces, veterans and family members and advocates, women who'd served and women who were still serving, women who'd been invisible for too long. She adjusted the microphone, began, "My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, United States Marine Corps. For 3 years, I served in a capacity I still can't fully discuss. I deployed to places that officially don't exist, conducted operations that remain classified, and sustained injuries that the system initially didn't know how to recognize." She paused, letting that sink in. "When I was medically separated and assigned to a garrison unit, I was mocked, called weak, questioned about whether I'd ever really seen combat. People looked at me, a woman in supply logistics with a TBI, and assumed I was exaggerating my service or seeking attention." Her voice remained steady, clinical, just stating facts. "They didn't know about the 16 missions I'd conducted in hostile territory. They didn't know about the compound where an IED nearly killed me and my team. They couldn't know, because that information was classified. So I sat quietly and absorbed their contempt, because I didn't have the clearance to defend myself." She saw heads nodding in the audience. Recognition. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because my experience isn't unique. There are women throughout this country, throughout the military, who served at the highest levels, who sustained life-altering injuries, who sacrificed everything for missions that will never be publicly acknowledged. And when they transition out, they face a system that doesn't know how to support them." Maya clicked to her first slide. Statistics on disability rating disparities. Women from classified programs receive disability ratings 42% lower than comparable male veterans. They're more likely to have claims denied, more likely to face lengthy appeals, more likely to be questioned about the legitimacy of their service. This isn't because they're less qualified or less injured. It's because the system wasn't designed with them in mind. Next slide. Photos of Silent Emblem members who'd agreed to be featured. Faces blurred for operational security, but their stories visible. 3 years ago, I founded the Silent Emblem Project to address this gap, to create a network where women from classified backgrounds could support each other, share resources, and advocate for systemic change. We've grown to over 100 members. We've helped dozens of veterans secure proper disability ratings. We've partnered with legal organizations, medical providers, and policy advocates to push for reforms. She looked directly at the audience. But we shouldn't have to do this. Veterans shouldn't need a specialized advocacy network just to receive the benefits they've earned. The system should work for everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of whether their service can be publicly discussed, regardless of how their injuries manifest. Final slide, her call to action. So here's what I'm asking. If you're a veteran struggling to navigate the VA, reach out. If you're a provider or advocate who wants to better support classified veterans, get trained. If you're a policymaker who has the authority to implement change, do it. And if you're someone who's never served but wants to support those who have, believe us. Believe us when we say we're hurt, even if the paperwork doesn't reflect it. Believe us when we say we served, even if we can't describe the details. Believe us when we say we need help, even if we look fine on the outside. She stepped back from the podium, signaling she was finished. The applause started slowly, then built. Not just polite appreciation, but something that felt like recognition, like validation. Maya returned to her seat, hands still shaking, but feeling lighter than she had in years. After the event, dozens of women approached her. Some wanted to share their stories. Others wanted information about the Silent Emblem Project. Several were advocates and providers who wanted to learn how to better better support classified veterans. One woman, older, maybe in her 60s, with the bearing of a senior officer, waited until the crowd had thinned. When she finally approached, she said simply, "Central Intelligence Agency, Operations Officer, 28 years, medically retired with PTSD and a traumatic brain injury from a car bombing in Pakistan." Maya recognized the tone, the careful revelation of information that was still partially protected. "I've been fighting the VA for 11 years, the woman continued. "They keep denying my claims because my job title doesn't match my injuries. I've exhausted my appeals. I'm out of options." She paused. "Can you help?" Maya pulled out her phone, opened her contacts. "What's your name?" "Patricia. Patricia Morrison." "Patricia, I need you to send me everything. Every medical record, every denial letter, every piece of documentation you have. I can't promise miracles, but I can promise you won't be fighting alone anymore." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that for someone you just met?" "Because someone did it for me, and because you deserve better than what you've been given." Patricia Morrison's case became the foundation for what Maya started calling Phase 2. She'd spent 3 years building the Silent Emblem Project as a peer support network. Now it was time to evolve into something more aggressive, a formal advocacy organization with legal resources, policy influence, and the capacity to force systemic change. She hired a small staff, 2 case managers, a part-time attorney, and an administrative coordinator, applied for grants from veterans foundations, established partnerships with organizations that had congressional connections. By the end of the year, they'd secured funding to operate at a larger scale. By the following spring, they had a legal team capable of taking cases all the way to federal court if necessary. Patricia Morrison's case was their first major victory. After 2 years of appeals, documentation reviews, and expert testimony, her disability rating was adjusted to 90%, with 12 years of retroactive benefits. When the decision came through, Patricia called Maya, and they both cried. "This changes everything," Patricia said. "I can finally afford the treatment I need. I can finally stop fighting just to survive." "You always deserved this," Maya told her. "The system just needed to catch up." 5 years after Admiral Hendress walked into that warehouse, Maya stood in her office at the Silent Emblem Project headquarters. They'd moved out of the small base office into a proper facility in San Diego, a renovated building with space for staff, meeting rooms for support groups, and a resource library stocked with everything from VA regulation manuals to civilian job training materials. The walls were no longer bare. Photos covered them now. Members of the Silent Emblem network who'd agreed to be featured. Women from every branch, every classified program, every generation of service. Some were thriving. Others were still struggling. All of them were part of a community that recognized their value. Maya's tremor had improved over the years, though it never fully disappeared. She'd learned to type with it, write with it, shake hands with it. Her migraines were less frequent. Her seizures were well controlled. She still had bad days, but they no longer defined her. She'd helped over 300 veterans navigate the VA system. She'd testified before Congress twice. She'd trained hundreds of medical providers and benefits specialists on recognizing combat trauma in non-traditional contexts. She'd built something that would outlast her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Martinez, the lance corporal she'd helped years ago. He'd been promoted to sergeant and was now working as a peer mentor for other wounded Marines. Just helped a Marine with a prosthetic leg get approved for continuation. Learned it from watching you. "Thanks for showing me what advocacy looks like, Staff Sergeant." Maya smiled, typed back, "That's all you. Keep doing the work." Another message, this one from Dr. Okonkwo. Reminder, quarterly check-in next week. "Also, I'm putting together a panel on TBI recovery and wanted to know if you'd be interested in speaking. No pressure." She added it to her calendar. A knock on her office door. One of the case managers, holding a file. "New intake, former Army intelligence analyst. Having trouble with a denied PTSD claim. Think you could take this one?" Maya held out her hand for the file. "Send me everything. I'll review it tonight." That evening, Maya drove to the coast. She parked at a lookout point where you could see the Pacific stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. She rolled up her sleeve, studied the tattoo on her arm. The phoenix with its geometric precision, the coordinates embedded in the wings, 34°15'N, 60°C2'12'E, a compound outside Kandahar that had destroyed her and remade her into something different. She'd never go back there. Didn't need to. That place had given her everything it had to give. Trauma and purpose, brokenness and resilience, an ending and a beginning. The person who'd served in that compound was gone. The person who'd sat quietly absorbing mockery in a warehouse was gone too. What remained was someone who understood that strength came in many forms, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was ask for help, that being broken and being valuable weren't mutually mutually exclusive. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Admiral Hendris. Saw your congressional testimony online. Excellent work. Proud of you, Chen. Maya typed back. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, ma'am. The reply came quickly. You did the seeing. I just pointed you toward the mirror. Maya sat there until the sun disappeared completely, watching stars emerge against the darkening sky. Tomorrow, she'd go back to fighting the VA for veterans who couldn't fight for themselves. She'd coordinate resources and manage cases and push for policy changes that might take years to implement. She'd have good days and bad days, victories and setbacks, moments of pride and moments of exhaustion, but she wouldn't be doing it alone. She had a team. She had a network. She had a community of women who understood what it meant to serve in silence and struggle in silence and finally be seen. The phoenix on her arm caught the last light, a reminder that you could burn down to ash and still rise. That transformation wasn't betrayal of who you'd been, that there was honor in both the warrior who ran toward gunfire and the warrior who stayed behind to make sure everyone else made it home. Maya Chen had been both, would continue being both, in whatever form that took. She started her car, pulled back onto the highway, and drove toward the life she'd built from the pieces of the one she'd lost. There was work to do, and she was ready.